It is 6:32, Thursday, August 26, 2021. This meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded for storage and viewing on our district website. The public can participate during hearings of individuals and delegates by signing up for a live audio public speaks via WebEx or submitting a written statement using the BOE question form. Both forms are on the district's website. Adequate written notice of this meeting of the South Orange Maplewood Board of Education has been sent to both townships and village clerks, the Star Ledger, the News Record, Village Green, and tapintosoma.net. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And I'd just like to take one moment to welcome our brand new business administrator, Mr. Eric Burnside. Today is day 2 with us. So welcome aboard, and we look forward to working with you, not just in committees, but in our board meetings as well. And thank you for being with us this evening. And with that, I believe, Mr. Gersh, are you still going to, can one of our board secretaries please take the role? I'll do it that way. You can give me suspense.
Mr. Burnside's going to do it tonight.
Yeah.
All right.
Board Member Susan Bergen,
Here.
Board Member Shannon Cuttle.
Yeah.
Board Member Thayer Joshua.
Here.
Board Member Anne Marie Manny.
Here.
Board Member Alyssa Malaspina.
Here. And welcome.
Thank you. I don't believe we have any student reps. Am I wrong?
That's correct. Not for this meeting.
Board Member Chris Saban.
Here.
Board Member Aaron Siders.
Let the record reflect that Board Member Siders informed us that she would be late. So thank you.
Board Member Courtney Winkfield.
Here.
Board Member Johanna Wright.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. The school board meeting is a business meeting in public and not a meeting with the public. Oftentimes, it may appear to members of our audience that the board takes action with very little comment, or in many cases, a unanimous vote. Before a matter is placed on the agenda at a public meeting, and administration has thoroughly reviewed it with the superintendent. If the superintendent is satisfied, the matter is ready to be presented to the Board of Education. It is referred to the appropriate board committee. Members of the board committee work with administration and the superintendent to ensure that members fully understand the matter. After the committee discusses the matter, it is then shared with other board members for consideration, and only then is it placed on the agenda for discussion or an action at a public meeting. With that, we are now at the time for our first public speaks.
Excuse me, Board President Joshua, do you have to do the
I do.
virtual?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Garcia, for bringing it to my attention. I apologize. I don't see. Oh, there's Ms. Butler. Tisking me, I'm sure. I'd like to make a motion to hold this meeting virtually. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Board Member Cuttle. All in favor? All right, that is unanimous, Mr. Burnside and Mr. Garcia. And we are now at the time for our first public speaks, also known as hearings of individuals and delegations. This is an opportunity for you to share your concerns about an agenda item, but not a time for dialogue with the board. Board requests that you state your name and the town of your residence for the record. We'll set the time to 3 minutes for each speaker. We ask that you respect that time limit. We must cut you off so it does not appear as if we are giving anyone an advantage to share their views over another individual. Speakers have the full protection of free speech during public speaks. However, this forum does not protect you from the subject of your free speech pursuing libel or slander charges. And finally, the board recommends that all members of our community pursue the chain of command. I am now going towards our audio comment. And I just want to refresh this. I don't see any here, so I'm now going to move on to written submissions. Fresh. And I don't see any on here either. So that concludes our first public speaks. Dr. Taylor, do you want to make the motion for discussion for 4191?
Thank you. Yes, to our board president, and good evening to our board members. And again, welcome to Mr. Burnside. I would like to put before the board's consideration action item 4191.
May I have a second? Thank you, Board Member Saban. All in favor? All right, that is appears to be unanimous, Mr. Burnside and Mr. Garcia. All right, discussion on action item 41 on resolution 4191. Board Member Manning.
So, Dr. Taylor, can you just describe what our next steps would be and what our legal obligations are now that all the bids came over so much more than we expected? And when will we know the impact to the timeline?
So I will yield to Mr. Gershio. I've been keeping up with it, but there's a little bit of back and forth around how high this came in and our analysis of it. Mr. Gershio, can you give us just a brief cliff notes of that, please?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. You can hear me, correct? I spoke with our construction management company, the representative who's overseeing all our projects, and the project did come in over budget about at least $1 million. So the next step is obviously, the first step is to reject all bids. They are going to go back, the construction management company and the architect, to review the specifications and talk with some of the contractors to see what triggered the higher than estimated bids that came in. And they're going to review and see where they can, I guess the word is tweak the specifications for when they're sent out, when they're released again, advertised again. They're also going to look at possibly restructuring how the bid is issued, maybe partnering it with a different school to see if maybe they can get better pricing for some of the items that are in the bid. The specific area that was more expensive was the HVAC piece. So they're looking to see if they could pair it with another school to see if maybe if it's with one of the larger schools, it could possibly bring down the cost estimate of that. And they are, as of right now, it doesn't look like it impacts the timeline of completion. It looked so hopefully they can have an answer for us in the next few weeks. And I will talk to them as well as Mr. Burnside to try to see if we can have some more information by the next board meeting. Hopefully.
Thank you, Board Member Cottle.
Thank you, President Joshua. Just a follow-up to Board Member Manny, and thank you, Andrea, for the information. And also welcome Mr. Burnside. I guess my follow-up question to that is, do we anticipate, because I know some costs of materials have gone up, especially construction materials, wood, metal, other types of items because of the pandemic, processing and other related. Do we know, or is this something we can inquire to or anticipate that there could be cost differences right now because of the cost of supply and demand have gone up with certain types of goods, especially around construction materials?
That definitely was an impact. Do the HVAC piece specifically, because there's a lot of people requesting that type of work, ventilation and the demand of that type of trade. So that has been impacting the pricing. It's a big difference in pricing just from the two bids we just opened, a couple of months ago. So they're going to look at it, like I said, they're going to see if maybe if we package it differently with maybe another school instead of those two schools, maybe package it with one of the middle schools, we may be able to hopefully get better pricing, but they're going to look into it, and we'll try to see if we can have some more answers in the next couple of weeks, because they are reaching out to contractors to find out their feel for that particular trade as well as the others. That answer your question?
Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member
You're welcome.
Wright?
Yes, good evening, everybody, and welcome, Mr. Burnside. Andrew, I was wondering when you found out about this. As chair of FFT, I sort of found out with everyone else. So when do we know this, have this information?
Information was finalized yesterday.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions on 4191? Okay, thank you. Mr. Gershel, I have one question. When do you anticipate rebidding?
Hopefully we can get it out within the next month to 6 weeks. But hopefully I'll have a better answer to that in the next few weeks.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions? All right, seeing none, I'll close discussion on resolution 4191. Mr. Burnside, please call the roll.
Board Member Bergen,
Yes.
Board Member Cuddle,
Yes.
Board Member President Joshua,
Yes.
Board Member Manny,
Yes.
Board Member Malaspina,
Yes.
Board Member Saban,
Yes.
Board Member Siders.
Still not with us yet. Okay,
sorry.
so inform the board she'll be late. Thank you.
Board Member Wingfield,
Yes.
Board Member Wright.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to move to the board retreat to discuss board and district goals. May I have a second? Thank you, Board Member Malaspina. All in favor? All right, that appears to be unanimous. Mr. Burnside, Mr. Gershel. All right, we are now at goal setting discussion for this evening. So just a quick, I guess, sort of agenda. I did send everybody. So let me just, I guess, step back and reset. Obviously, we had 2 retreats earlier this summer, discussing lots of issues in terms of the revelations from our board self-evaluation and overall board dynamics. And we agreed to, all the comments that came out of the second retreat were then sent to me by Ms. Peterson from NJSBA. I took a look at those along with the executive committee and looked at the themes that were recurring. And I sent, as I sent an email to the board yesterday, there were maybe 5 or 6 things that came up repeatedly. And so I think 2 or 3 of these were more appropriate for a revision to the board goals, which I sent around. And then the others felt more appropriate for our governance document, which we usually look at after our January reorganization. So I just wanted to know if anyone had any questions or comments on that document before we go on to the district goals. And then before we do that, after that, I'll outline how, how the committees met in advance of this evening and what the expectations are in terms of what we get out of this evening's session. Board Member Wright, I don't know if that's an old or new hand because I know it was up before.
It's a new hand, and
Okay.
what I want to comment on in terms of old businesses, we've had our 2 retreats, but we seem to have retreated. We didn't come up with any type of resolutions or anything like that, whether we were going to do a restorative circle or come back to discuss some of the items that were there in terms of Robert's rules and things of that nature. So I don't know where we go from here, but I'm excited about the retreat this evening moving forward. But it's sort of hard to move forward when we're still stagnant as a board.
Thank you for the comment, Ms. Wright. I get Board Member Wright. I can address it later or I can address it now. I just want to see Board Member Manny has a hand up as well. So I wanted to go with her first before I come back to you. Go ahead, Board Member Wright. I mean, Board Member Manning. You're muted, Board Member Manning.
Sorry, the sidebar disappeared. My question was around working on the new board governance document. Are you thinking we're going to work on that between now and December, ready for January, or, okay, all right. Because that might address some of the questions that Board Member Wright had just brought up, but.
Yes, I think it does. So just, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the email from yesterday, Board Member Wright, but we did add, training on Robert's rules as one of our goals, as a revision to the board goals that were passed earlier this year. So we definitely took that into consideration. That probably came up more than anything else in comments that were circulated by Ms. Peterson. So we definitely wanted to acknowledge that and find that and, commit ourselves as a board to getting further training on that because it'd be beneficial to all of us. So I just wanted to acknowledge that so that you're aware that we did, part of what you're considering stagnant naturally is moving on is incorporating the feedback from all of our colleagues into revised board goals that can address the issues that were raised there. Some of them, as I said, were more appropriate for our governance models, such as establishing timelines for responses to communication, funneling questions through committees for the superintendent. And I'm just going to pull up the email because I don't remember everything I wrote in there. But just give me a second, folks. And there were one or two others. I don't want to stall the meeting doing that. But the point is that we pulled out the things that came up repeatedly and figured out where was the best place for it. Some were the goals, which were revised. And again, we can still have more discussion on it. We're not voting on those this evening, and anticipate voting on those in September. So we still have 3.5 weeks to continue discussion. And then others, as I said, to Board Member Manning's point, would be addressed. We have in our governance document, which will be, revised in January. Board Member Malasmina?
Yes, I would like to echo Board Member Wright's statement, also especially around the idea of a restorative circle. As I have said before, this is something we ask our staff and our students to participate in, and I believe we should participate in one ourselves. There are a lot of unresolved issues and a lot of things that occurred that I think a restorative circle could address and help us to move forward in a positive manner instead of continually trying to drag up the past like has been occurring. So I think that this would be something that could be beneficial.
I'm inclined to agree with that. I mean, I also think that we can agree not to bring up the past by just not bringing up the past. But a restorative circle can help with that. There are questions about the effectiveness of doing one in public. So how do you do a restorative circle as a full board when, if we meet as a full board, it has to be in public? So there are questions around that I've talked to NJSBA about in terms of how we can proceed in that manner. So it's not a topic that's been forgotten. It's not on the revised goals for this evening because again, it might be something more pertinent to our governance model, and it also could just be something we just do. So that's why it's not there this evening. But I do take that comment and just want to let you know that it's not something that was forgotten about.
Thank you.
Any other comments on board goals? Okay, great, thank you. Now for the district goals. So just so everyone understands, like I asked the committee chairs to meet with their committees and or just brainstorm with them, whether through email or short meetings about themes that they thought would be relevant and important to the goals that we'd like to set for the district for this coming school year. After that, what I did was get notes from those brainstorming sessions and put them all together in the document, which I believe can I share my screen, Mr. Bonds? Do I need special permission, or I can just hit the share button? Okay, and obviously for CNI, since we're all on that committee, just as a warning, before I start presenting that we have more goals there, and that those were also the general themes were brainstormed by the executive committee, with the idea that we'd probably spend more time on that this evening than anything else, to allow everyone else to participate. But given, again, we can't have our large, we can't all we couldn't all just meet to have a pre-meeting, if you will. So that's why we just put a couple of things down and wanted to hear more, and just looking at CNI minutes from the past year, or about what has come up repeatedly, and what are things that the former smaller committee discussed, and how to frame those ideas. So with that, let me figure out how to do this. Give me 1 second. Okay, hold on. Minimize that. Is that? Okay. Sorry for the delay. All right, let's see.
While you're waiting, I just want to say that in about 5 minutes, I will need to leave because my niece is going to college tomorrow, and we're bidding her farewell. So
Yep, and we thank
so
you, and
I
thank
just
you.
wanted to tell you that, so you didn't wonder if I dropped out, why I was.
No, I know. Sorry, I know we talked about it yesterday. So yeah,
Yes,
thank you for the
yes.
notice. So yep, you can just, when it's time to go, you can just go. We understand, and thank you for the notice. I appreciate it.
No problem.
All right. Oh. Okay, hold on. Can you guys see that? Okay, because I can now barely see you, so I'm trying to fix this so I can do both. So bear with me. I do have 2 screens, but it made you guys a lot smaller. Okay, so I think that's working, and I don't. Mr. Bonds, how can I mute myself? Oh, there it is. Got it. Okay, here we go. Alrighty, so I'm just gonna go forward from here, and I just put this together really quickly. I don't have the district's PowerPoint template, so apologies, bear with me. This is whatever Bill Gates thought was best for us. So just as an order, like I said, go through the committees, and there were some other ones that came up that I didn't necessarily think fit in a committee per se, but did want to bring up because board members contributed them. And then lastly, like what our next steps will be in terms of how we get from here to our September meeting with goals. So we'll go to personnel. Board member Manning, do you want to sort of walk through this quickly? And then after that, we'll get Dr. Taylor's take, and then we can go around the rest of the room.
Sure. Thank you. So we had talked about undertaking a role or a goal of rewriting job descriptions to make sure that they have an equity lens embedded in all of our job descriptions. We had also talked about our goal of making our classrooms reflect our student population. So how best to do that, and how do we target staff, retain? This has been an ongoing goal that we haven't necessarily seen big shifts in our demographics. So how do we make this achieve this goal? And then there's been a lot of conversation among board members about, what can we glean from exit interviews, and in an effort to obviously improve the experience of our staff. As Dr. Friedman said, they're joining and they're going to spend 20 to 30 years here. So how do we support our staff long term? And then again, what type of targeted professional development on anti-bias and anti-racism can we have for our staff that is effective?
Thank you. Dr. Taylor?
Yeah, I would agree that those have been the themes that have been consistent in our conversations over the last probably couple years that I've been here. I think that one thing that I've learned about district goals is just trying to make sure that we're being clear on what's a district goal and what's just a district expectation, right? That we're able to like, for example, what makes these themes, right? Which one or how can we organize the thoughts in them to be a cohesive goal that goes beyond just the general professional expectations that we have for our HR department and those processes that are connected to HR. Like, what's special about them? And I think that there's a lot here that I would definitely want to have more conversations about. And I would also want to make sure, because we do have a finite amount of time and a finite amount of staff and team members, that we're targeting that, what we can really move the needle on. Like, where's the realistic, achievable piece that we want to focus our sweat equity towards. But I think that they're all very relative. Relevant.
Yeah, and Dr. Taylor, just not to take us off target, but that's like one of our big concerns is like, how do we measure over a year for something that we know is multi-year and cultural shifts, right? How do we put a measurement in for the evidence that we're going to see next May, right? To show that we've made progress toward these important goals.
Thank you. Mr. Burns, I just want to reflect for the record that Board Member Siders had joined us, which is probably accurate because I know she's frequently talking about SMART goals, and I think that's kind of what Board Member Manny and Dr. Taylor are getting at. We have these large scale initiatives, but we have to distill them into SMART goals that are not setting the district up for failure. So thank you for that. And Board Member Wingfield, did you want to add anything as our newest Personnel Committee member?
Sure. I think when we're talking about personnel, I think one of the things that comes to mind for me is sort of like, is it the chicken or the egg? So when we're thinking about recruiting and retaining, in particular, a diverse staff, I think there's the sort of external goal of wanting to go out and find folks that really reflect the students in our community. But I also think we have to think about the sort of current status of the culture and also make sure that we're not losing sight of a really important lever, which is sort of creating a culture among our adults here that is really going to support a diverse staff. So I think that some of these themes around really wanting to use professional development as a lever to get at that goal. So if it's, using, whether it's implicit bias, anti-racism, some of those sort of cultural competency professional developments, or even just investing in professional learning, sort of to the Dr. Fergus report, like really investing in our PLC structure so that it's the kind of place that folks are going to feel really nurtured, invested in, and are going to feel are able to grow. I think that's a really important lever. I also want to just sort of flag that there's a lot of data, I think, that needs to be built into any goal that we have around this, whether it's really looking at our exit interviews or even engaging in some qualitative research around the folks we have in district now, so that we're not engaging in this goal without understanding the experience of the folks who reside in our district now. So I think that I think the goal does need to be smart. I think we've got to be really clear about how we measure this beyond just a tokenizing of demographics. And I think that needs to really be built in through sort of quarterly indicators so that we're not just putting everything to the end of the year.
Thank you. Board Member Bergen and then Board Member Connell.
Thank you. I just wanted to add on to the diversity hiring piece, and this may be too detailed to go into a board goal, but I did attend a meeting about the CJ Pride this spring and shared it with the Personnel Committee. It's a consortium that works to hire diverse staff by doing shared recruiting for multiple school districts to reach more potential applicants that way. And I don't know if the district has considered whether or not it would be worthwhile to join something like that. And I also just wanted to ask if teacher evaluations would be something that would fall within this goal this year, or if that would go somewhere else.
Dr. Taylor, I would think they fit here, but let's hear from Dr. Taylor.
Okay.
So I think we know that when it comes to the evaluation process, that C&I personnel really work together, right? That there's curriculum and instruction and managing the evaluation process is really, they work really close, because there's also not just observing teachers, but making sure that we're meeting timelines and that the evaluations are of quality, right? And that they're measuring things that impact the things that we're talking about now. And so that definitely, we of course, and if you've been in the personnel committee, we, during the year, we give updates on the evaluations and how they're moving forward, and we're tracking progress to make sure that, because in the past, it's been a real problem that evaluations were not being completed. So I think it definitely is a shared goal. A lot of these are shared goals, but it could be mentioned here as well, right? That one thing that I'll circle back around just really quickly on, just around the exit interview piece. I think that is an important one. I love the comments that we had in the personnel committee about targeting the actual comments within the exit interviews to help build data out of it, right? To try and see the trends that are, even though it's by definition, it's qualitative, right? It's an interview, but being able to pull data out of it to say how many were positive, how many were concerning, how many were, you understand what I'm saying, but just, I think that could be a powerful thing. And I think also the job description piece, I think, is an interesting approach. What I would just be careful, again, just targeting where we're putting our sweat equity, that we're going to, because if I change the job description of someone who's already in the job, it does not necessarily change their expectations, right? Because they were hired under a certain umbrella. And once you change the job description, you would almost have to do the whole rehiring process if it was to be impactful of the people who are in it. Just, one thought process, I think symbolically it could be really powerful, but it might not have it might not push us in the direction that we all want to go. Just wanted to share that.
Thank you for that. Board Member Cottle?
Thank you, President Joshua. So I guess some things I just wanted to maybe have us consider and highlight would be, Dr. Taylor, thank you, just mentioned rewriting job descriptions, the importance of us as a board and our commitment of ensuring that not just their job descriptions, but across the district, having an equity lens in regards to making sure we're using language that's affirming, and that could really capture the essence of the diversity of our district, so folks know when they're reading our announcements that is a welcoming, safe space. And I think that's important. We've talked about this before since I started on the board. And at times there have been perhaps not clear understanding about the welcoming community and that we are. So to that point, and then the other thing I just wanted to maybe mention was in regards to recruitment, the same aspect. We've talked about, HBCUs, we've talked about the consortium that board member Bergen mentioned. That was also mentioned via our NJSBA state leader meetings, and many colleagues said of the importance of that consortium, but also thinking outside of the lens and targeting other points of interest and how to recruit, perhaps thinking out of the box and non-traditional lenses. And that might not be able to be built into maybe how we're discussing today, but the importance of that is something that has repeatedly come up. So I just, since we're just having a discussion, wanted to bring it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Color. I think one of the things we have to, as during these discussions, is figure out what's more important, what's more quote appropriate for us as the board in terms of setting the goal, and what would be more of an action plan, which is, on the districts and figure out how to achieve the goal, right? So we can talk about, recruit, but I think it would be on the district to figure out, where they think how recruiting would be the most beneficial and most impactful. So and that's actually not to foreshadow, but our last slide is one of our last slides talks about, the action plan. So that's thank you for that comment. Anyone else before I go back to Board Member Wakefield? Okay, go ahead, Board Member Wakefield.
I just want to piggyback on Board Member Cuddle's point, and also just flag that if the recruiting efforts have been sort of part of the district's work for some time, and we're not necessarily seeing those efforts yield the impact we want, one of the things that could be really great to have embedded in this goal, perhaps as a sub-goal, is to invite the district to engage in a little bit of like inquiry work or root cause work around the hiring practices themselves. So once we recruit the candidates, what's the actual practice that are hiring? What does hiring really look like? And how do we begin to examine it for particular gaps that could be addressed that may just inadvertently sort of be yielding the outcomes that we're seeking to change? So as we seek to sort of go and find the right folks, how do we also simultaneously examine through a really critical lens the kind of processes that exist in-house that may be getting in the way?
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any other hands, so I believe the next one is policy. Board Member Bergen, do you want to walk through this for us?
Sure. The policy committee met on a couple days ago on Monday night to talk about a goal around integration. And we sort of looked at it, splitting it up into at the elementary integration and the middle school integration. And then for both of those, like the algorithm piece and the adaptive work of actually integrating students into classrooms. So let me pull up some of my notes. We talked about for the elementary integration, lessons learned from this rollout of the algorithm, and some thoughts were about gathering individual level data for next time around. And we talked about the Marshall Jefferson pairing, and I think some of the bumps with this rollout were related to those schools still being paired together and where to place kindergarten siblings of Jefferson students in terms of time conflicts and other things. And that it, would be helpful to start articulating how, even if we don't know when they're going to come undone, like start to think through how that's going to happen. We also talked about the importance of communicating with new families around the plan and in particular, the sibling preference not being a legacy at a particular elementary school, that it only applies if the students are in the same building at the same time. And we also talked about the adaptive work at the elementary level that might include professional development and support for students, and may overlap with the goal that we'll all work on for the curriculum with CNI. And then in the middle school, we thought that a lot of the language from last year's goal could be used for the technical algorithm side, but that we also wanted to include some of the adaptive work there and communication around that. And then finally, we talked about a written action plan. And I think this is a global comment from board member Siders and everyone on policy about having some sort of document where we can track progress on the goals along the way and not save it for the to look at the end of the year, and maybe plug that into the annual agenda. I don't know if I guess board member Melstein,
Thank you.
I don't know if she's still here, or if board member Siders would like to jump in.
Yeah, and then we'll have Dr. Taylor comment. And board member Smith did, as she said, she had to leave the meeting. So
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add.
all right, Dr. Taylor.
I think this is really well done. I think that we have learned a lot, right? And part of what we've learned is also connected to other ongoing, challenges that many districts have. Like, for example, when parents bring in younger students, they haven't changed the address for the older student, right? There's a break in the system there where most of us would believe, if I bring my other kid in, you'll connect me as the parent to both kids. Whatever I bring in for the younger kid will then go, but it's not that. And that was probably the biggest challenge that we had, because through all of our filtering, some of the parents didn't show up as having siblings. We of course were able to adjust that as we were notified, but we would prefer, of course, to not have that challenge. So that's the one that I've been really thinking about with our power school system is, what are we doing that parents are bringing new kids and we're not able to see them? The system had to be designed smarter than that, right? And so that really was one of the only hiccups that we consistently had with this. But I do think that even for parents who had a passionate expression that I live close to this school, or I have a preference for this school, I bought my house for this school, we were able to share that that's not what our district's priorities are. We're designed to provide our kids with a rich, diverse experience. And most were really accepting of that. I do think that the middle school piece, because the board has shifted in membership so much since our previous discussions on the middle school vision, it will be a great thing for us to just revisit that topic in general, right? That everyone now has a different lens, different people, different experiences, because our partner, our consultant is really eager to help us with that. And there are different ways for us to go about it. And so I'm looking forward to solving that puzzle. And I definitely feel as though that the adaptive piece is something that we have been preparing for prior to my arrival, but it's ongoing, right? Staff members don't stay in the same building. They may not even stay in general. They may leave. And so whatever work was done in years preparing staff for this eventuality, even in my first year, 30 or 40 people retired or moved on. And so it's an ongoing update that's needed. So I'm just saying all that to say that I support these themes. I think it's timely, and I think it's a smart way to go about the next steps. And also, for those board members who weren't on before, my previous 2 years, we've done mid-year retreats where we give an update on every goal in public. To add a quarterly piece, I think I'm not sure how that would fall on our annual agenda. We're actually placing that in your Friday packet. We had a discussion again today on it. And we were thinking about even the report out of district goals in the board meetings, because we hope that COVID is much calmer for our district this year. It's our goal to give an update on the district goals at every board meeting during the superintendent's report, and not take up so much time as we're doing so.
Thank you. Dr. Taylor, two things that you just said resonated with me. One is, what about the idea, and we don't have to answer now, but understanding that maybe twice a year isn't enough and 4 times a year might be too much. It might be 3 times a year, right? Actually be right where we want to be in terms of getting those district goal updates. So just chew on that, if you will. And the second one, the comments about the middle school integration, do you think it's worth, a discussion on, maybe not this evening, about should the goal even be more towards how we're going to do it instead of, sort of the what and the when? Because, before we had an idea of, once we agreed on an algorithm, we knew how we were going to do it into the elementary schools. It sounds like we may want to revisit the how on the middle schools, like as the slide says here. Do we use the algorithm? Do we do feeder schools based on the elementary schools? One, or maybe there was a third option, right? So is that what you're thinking when you said what you said earlier?
Yeah, well, part of our discussion, right, was level setting what the enrollments of the middle schools look like when you compare them, right? And even year over year, there are shifts in the socioeconomic, and other demographic data for our middle schools. And I think one of the things that I shared and I learned, and our consultant also shared, was that from the numbers sense, they don't look that different, not nearly as different as some of the elementary schools, but that does not mean that this is not needed, right? So that's the type of conversation that I think would be helpful, but also understanding that some of the most passionate transfer requests that we get are people who want to go to one or the other middle schools. So anticipating that that's going to be an electric conversation, possibly for the community, because some of these kids have been together 6 years in a certain group. And while middle school naturally separates some kids, in our district, we have 2. And so a lot of kids do stay together. And so looking at that and being able to communicate that and research the unintended consequences or just the challenges around it and kind of get to the why, right? The big WHY. Why are we addressing this in middle schools and backwards mapping from there? Because I think that's a powerful piece that we've been working on, is the why, and then we can get to the how, but getting to the root of the why.
Thank you. Any comments on the policy themes? All right, Board Member Wingfield.
I appreciate Board Member Bergen and the team, the presence and the balance here of the sort of technical goals around integration and then beginning to address some of the adaptive goals. I think this is something that we've been talking about across our committees over the last 6 months. And in particular, thinking about how we begin to act on some of the research and data that's been provided, in particular through Dr. Fergus's work a couple of years ago, studying the elementary schools, really talking about the important shifts that need to take place simultaneous to our integration efforts on a technical end to ensure that the systems and structures that we know need to be in place to support students. It's sort of alluded to at the bottom here where it talks about classroom supports, but really when we're talking about the building a cohesive approach to multi-tiered systems of supports, our intervention efforts for students, ensuring that what students experience at South Mountain is really aligned to what they're going to experience at Clinton and so forth, I think is definitely multi-year investment work, but work that we need to really begin to break down and articulate now. and begin to think about what part of that work we would really like to see the district accomplish in this year. So I appreciate that presence here and look forward to being able to build that out in a really tangible way, so that the district can lead on that.
Great, thank you. Any other comments on the policy themes before we move on to finance? Nope. Okay, up next we have finance, also facilities and technology themes. Board Member Wright, do you want to lead us through this?
Okay, good evening again, everyone. Okay, as chair, I wanted to put goals together along with the finance committee. And this is what I would like to see as the framework. Obviously, there are some items that are missing when we're talking about what we should have and what we do have, and things that were missed that are key to what we're talking about in terms of support and what has to be delivered by the district. And so when you're looking at the support of the current prospective needs associated with the COVID-19 pandemic, we know that we've gotten a lot of information and suggestions, and people are basically crying out for the safety issues and things like that. So making sure that we have funds in place, whether it's outdoor, things that we need in order to keep our children safe, whether it's lunch or whatever it may be, having things in place for that. The regular monitoring and reporting on elementary school construction projects. As we've heard tonight, this is something that we absolutely have to stay on top of, and it certainly should be a part of that framework. Further, we need to develop and finalize secondary school construction planning as well. I see the consolidation of the classroom app, the use of data to support budget development to identify inequities in allocation of resources, return on investment on transportation, tracking construction project work orders. A couple of things that's missing that I wanted to add were our legal expenses, where the state has come in, some of the old things to bring up with the framework, along with a few other things, and including open FFT meetings for the public to tune in and see exactly what's going on, especially in light of these projects. So I think that's about it, aside from, I think, so mentioned the alternative school, having some type of alternative program back in place for our students. That's part of the objective. So that's about it for me.
Yeah, thank you for that, Board Member Wright. So the alternative school, I moved to other, because like I said, I didn't really think, as we said during discussion over email, like that didn't seem like a finance committee goal. But if we wanted to discuss it as something the district should pursue, we didn't know exactly where to fit it. So it's in this presentation. It's just not on this slide. So I didn't want you to just wanted to point that out. And the legal, I don't remember seeing that, but I know that is definitely something that finance has talked about in the past. Again, I'm not sure how to action that as a goal. One of the things we do talk about that does decrease legal expenses is, streamlining them, right? So all requests going through one particular person, trying to streamline things that way. So that's another opportunity. I think COVID probably has thrown off legal expenses because there's been lots of changes and lots of directives from the NJDOE that we need to get clarification on. But I do fully support the idea of spending less on legal expenses. So with that, I just want to let Board Member Cottle, and I don't know if Board Member Sabian wanted to add anything before we let Dr. Taylor comment.
Thank you, President Joshua. Thank you, Chairwoman Wright. I appreciate that Chairwoman Wright has coupled and put together on some themes that she sent around an email to members of FFT recently. We didn't have the opportunity to have a discussion in FFT, but I appreciate the start of the conversation. You know, I think that along with the FFT themes here that are presented, subcategories and deeper dives could be beneficial in regards to the COVID pandemic, reporting on the construction projects as a whole. I'm not really familiar with the consolidation of the classroom app mention.
Yeah,
So
that's real quick, Shannon. That's Mr. Bonds has talked about that. Lots of different, staff members have used different applications to engage their students. And so what we end up having is, during virtual, even after, like, we've talked about with gosh, why am I forgetting it? Seesaw, that you go to 6 different classes and you have 6 different teachers who are using 6 different applications, right? That can slow a student down, particularly if their device can only handle a certain amount of applications running either at the same time or even all together. So,
right,
Mr.
so
Bonds had talked about putting, trying to do an audit, which I believe he did present to the committee about these are all the things, and then it's now, how do we tackle consolidation of that so that we have a more streamlined approach when our staff want to use certain applications, that these are quote approved unquote applications for engaging students and others may not be. So that's really where that came from.
So thank you for that, President Joshua. So that wasn't clarified, but I know that Mr. Bonds has previously reported that they were in the middle of trying to create a catalog for that, but my understanding is it's not finalized, and that's something that's ongoing at this time. It hasn't been presented to FFT, but the understanding that, yes, to your point of there are many different apps that are amazing staff members are using and integrating within their systems for students for better access and equity. So that I do know is something that we've talked about, including as the district continues to look for more alternative and virtual applications, that we have a catalog of that. So that makes, that's a better clarification for that. The only other item I would add under potentially for the FFT, since again we didn't have the opportunity to have a discussion, would be the consideration of a theme around looking at classroom and building facility access and safety as a whole. And I don't know if that fits here or someplace else. That would be my only other consideration.
Thank you, Board Member Saban.
Yeah. I think that this is the start of a list, but I think to what Board Member Tuttle just mentioned, if we can consolidate and make this more streamlined and focus on what the goals are, and then also we have a number of in some instances, whether it's reporting out, whether it's tactics or it's just strategies, and just understand what our goals are and then raise those up to the goal, and then have the other elements with their strategies and tactics, and have them come through as bottom or as how we're going to deliver on this. And I mentioned in a message when we were emailing that some of these themes throughout these report outs here, the district has done this, and I'm going to sound like somebody who was here before me for multiple years before. We have done a number of these reports, and I know we need to keep doing them, but we also need to keep looking back to make sure that we're progressing to move forward. So we're not just consistently doing the same thing over again.
Thanks, Dr. Taylor.
Yeah, thank you for this, Chair Wright. And I think that as we start thinking about not just themes and goals, but expectations, I think that any one of those first 2 to 3 lines could be an overarching district goal that's created and broken out into, and into a SMART goal. I think that, some of these things are also expectations of all the folks who you employ in the district, right? Like, monitoring and reporting on construction projects. We've been doing that. You have a web page dedicated to it. We give you updates in your Friday packet. We spoke about it in our district goal presentation. So I think that, that's one of those things that's a day-to-day operation, but maybe doesn't rise to the level of a district, of a single category district goal, but it definitely is a part of what is expected of an administration, especially doing such a high level construction project. So I look forward to further conversation in the committee levels, just to really boil down to the high level district goals for each of these categories, that we can work towards.
Thanks. Any comments on the finance needs?
I
Board member
have,
Wright? Okay,
yes.
I was just gonna ask if that was old hand, but I realized it couldn't be because you.
No,
All right, go ahead. Sorry.
It's a newbie. I was going to add that what Board Member Cuddle mentioned in terms of security, which was one of the things that was listed, having a monthly reporting by the Director of School Safety once we get one, including attendance and chronic kinds of things that are going on, and especially in light of what has occurred on some of our properties, including, Underhill Field. To have those reportings from our security with the facilities part of finance will be important. And thank you, Shannon, for bringing that up.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. I think I did put that on the other list because I wasn't sure. I know that the security, it was kind of tricky for me because I understand that the position is going to report into the BA, but I didn't know if it was quote finance, facilities, if you will. So, but I do, if I lost it, I know I have it. So I thank you for that. Any other questions on the FFT themes? All right, we'll now move on to CNI, and I'm going to ask Board Member Siders to lead us through these.
Hello. All right. So EC met last week to review these items. We broke them out into teaching and learning / student achievement and high expectations and rigorous instruction. Around the teaching and learning. And we've talked about this in CNI about making that the adults in the building are making that contact with our students. Especially this past year when so many students were struggling socially and emotionally, and making sure we have that touchstone and kind of continuing to have that relationship with our adults and with our students in terms of what goes on outside of the schools and the student's life, and also what's going on in the classroom. We talked about social emotional support, centering student voices, and continuing support and implementation of the pre-K to 12 restorative practices. Under high expectations and rigorous instruction, we want to continue to have curriculum and instruction that's grounded in cultural competence. And looking and continue to expand on that work that Dr. Severance has been doing with the administration and the teachers. Sorry, I'm hearing people. Around practicing from the lens of the learner and using data to drive that work. And I'm not sure what that last bullet is, but I get making learning relevant and meaningful. I feel like that was actually something else different previously. I also want to add some of the, oh, thank you, inclusive curriculum assessment, thank you. So looking at high quality instructional materials reflecting diversity, I think that's feedback that we've heard from families and from students. Looking at race, ethnicity, language, gender, etc. Personalized and differentiated curriculum and learning for students. I also want to add some of the items that were in the Fergus report around aligning the math curriculum from elementary to middle to high school. There doesn't, feedback from families was that it didn't seem to be a coherent alignment. Another feedback was around having math coaches, which I know we're looking into having instructional coaches, but just spelling that out, that or pointing out specifically math coaches. And also our parental outreach regarding curriculum. We seem to provide translation into different languages for some of the information that we're trying to communicate to families. But when it comes to curriculum and instruction and changes in that area, we don't provide translation for that. We don't provide translators for people who are English language learners. So I'd like to see us take a look at that and also take a look at our modes for how we're communicating with families. I know we do a lot of email, a lot of push, but are there other ways that we can reach out to families in terms of maybe there is a town hall for our Haitian community where it's strictly in Haitian Creole? That was some kind of feedback that came from Dr. Fergus.
Like, can you respond now? Okay. Can you go back to the previous slide, please? Yep. So I think that this is, I think it's very rich as far as the response for each of the areas that is shown. I think it's also probably the deepest topic, right? Because there's just so many areas that C&I touches, and there's so many ways that we can improve and so many worthwhile ways we can improve. One thing that I would say that might be encompassing of many of these is our engagement with equal opportunity schools, right? That part of our engagement is speaking to the review of our processes and those type of things. And we have a follow-up meeting coming. And so perhaps when we have more conversations around the C&I piece, perhaps one thing that might touch many of these is similar to what Dr. Perez did for us last year, is more of an alignment, right? We have a lot of things, a lot of oars in the water, a lot of spoons in the pot, right? And so are we aligning, our EOS effort with our BPW effort with, like, there's lots of PD that's designed and happening, and trying to make sure that there's an alignment of the expectations, there's an alignment of the value system. And I think that the idea of having using systems to help interpret our information, we've been expanding that, and we're also using call systems that help parents while they're in parent teacher conferences to be able to have interpretations of those conversations. I think having a full Haitian or Latino type of event, I think that's a great idea that I would love to investigate some more, right? To see, we're starting to really dive into the monthly celebration of different cultures, and that might be another way for us to just not just show appreciation, but engage those in our community who are less engaged because of our processes. And so again, this is probably the biggest goal every year. It's the deepest because it's just by design. But I think that there are things that we do that touch a lot of pieces of this that would help it to be a more consolidated approach that's still rich and still touches these things. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Any comments on any of the CNR themes? All right, Board Member Manny and then Board Member Wakefield.
I guess my question is, I mean, the goal last year was a multi-year goal around some of these themes. So we're still thinking of weaving all that together, or are we making brand new goals, or are these ideas about how to be more specific so that they're more targeted and smart, et cetera?
Yeah, I think we had one, we talked a lot about teacher and learning and student achievement. So I think this is, taking, part of the multi-year of last year and sort of, making it a little more specific or a little more smart, as Board Member Cyrus would say. So I think and we wanted to brainstorm first, but the idea is right. We did set a goal. We want to continue that theme work, but also, what have we learned from last year that might make this year's goal a smarter goal? And so I think that's really the tack that we took in terms of incorporating, basically looking at all the CNI, minutes and trying to incorporate ideas. So thank you, Board Member Wakefield.
Dr. Taylor, I appreciated what you said about sort of this goal being a potential to sort of really bring synthesis to a lot of the disparate efforts, because I know that's something that we talk about in CNI a lot, this idea of really like trying to disrupt the siloing of what we mean when we say equity, right? As it's not this office or this leader or this sort of subset of work, but that it really is the center of everything we do in the district. And Board Member Manny, to your point, I almost see last year's goal, which was focused on really articulating the qualities that we want in all of our graduates as an evolution, where this year's goal for me is starting to shape up in CNI almost like the district's overall strategic plan and strategic vision for what it believes about teaching and learning. And instead of being like purely kid facing, to me, this is about like, what is it that educators in this district need to know and be able to do to really support a whole student, right? Not just in terms of building their competencies and skills or delivering content, but ensuring that we have the right kind of adult social emotional dispositions to be able to support students' social emotional well-being. And so I think there's a lot to be fleshed out here so that it is like measurable and tangible, and that we actually know what it is we're looking for in this bite-sized year of a goal like this. But for me, I think that there's the potential for us to gain some really exciting clarity about the direction that we're heading as a district in a goal like this, and then use that to really accelerate our efforts to see that impact actually show up in the classroom, which is what we all want.
Thank you for that, Board Member Wakefield. Go ahead, Dr. Taylor.
Yeah, I would just say, in previous experiences that I've had with New Jersey School Boards Association in their professional development around building district goals, this goal could be the entire district goal for the year, right? Like the other things that we've spoken about are super important in our expectations, but that's how deep this goal could go, right? It could be the goal, because it could have 8 subsections and within those subsections more bullets that are far reaching. So I just wanted to share that, and maybe not that I'm suggesting that, I'm just sharing that I've had evaluations in other places that were one goal, and it was a phone book of evidence because it goes so deep. The I'm not sure if we have received an update from Charlene regarding the district goal processes that are recommended, and I guess some of the deep dives in how how district goals should function, but it might be worthwhile to engage her in that, just to share the information for those who haven't been through this process before, because there's more than one way to do it. But I think the more specificity that we add into some of the goals, some of them begin to lose their effectiveness because you're narrowing the goal. But I understand the push and pull between that and making it smarter too, right? So just wanted to share that reflection.
Yeah, and that's I think one of the things that came out of like the discussions around how to get all this stuff into one or maybe two goals is that maybe it's, and board members Manny and Wright would know better than me, but maybe some of this is part of a strategic plan, which would be outside of a goal, but would be that overarching sort of district guiding document in a way that the goals are year to year. So that kind of came up about as well, and we don't have to dig deep into that this evening, but we did recognize when we were didn't want to leave anything out, but then also when we got this is the only one that had 2 slides, so this is the one that we had a lot of input in it and a lot of things we wanted to get in there. So any other comments on CNI? Okay, I'm going to move on to other. I think there's only a couple here. One of them I think we discussed, which was some of the legal bills, which again, I get this is not a, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. And those not on here, like I said, I apologize for that. Ms. Wright, did you want to expand on your thoughts about the alternate school? And then I'll come back to you, Board Member Cuddle.
Yeah, the alternatives. It's a school that was originally at Montrose, and it was for those students who had a difficulty adjusting to life at Columbia High School. For some, the school was overwhelming. For some, they just needed a smaller environment. I know that we've had board members, a board member's child that graduated from the alternative school, the guidance counselors. So it was for all types of children who came to the table with different issues. When I'm looking at our children who are now in the high school trying to find their way, it's the perfect time to bring Montrose back. We've tried all kinds of programs, but they have not worked. Montrose worked. It was very effective. We made a huge mistake in closing the school down and changing the whole scope of what the school would have been originally. But I think it's time that we bring it back, especially as we look at our graduation rate dropping and things of that nature.
Thank you. Board Member Cuddle and then Board Member Manny. Board Member Cuddle?
Yeah, sorry, I was
Yes.
having trouble with the system.
Go ahead.
So just to clarify, because it says other topics, but we don't have new business. So I don't know, like, I guess my question is the agenda doesn't say new business. So
I mean, we're still in the retreat portion. So we're talking about things that came up in, this slide is really everything that came up in the emails, and discussions, whether it was notes shared with me or, emails that I was participating in as a committee member about, the different goals. And some of these, like I said, were goals or themes that were suggested that didn't neatly fit into one of the 4 committees. So I put them here,
Okay.
but this isn't, I mean, we're still having the district goals discussion.
just for clarification, if for those watching, just wanted to make a note of that. I have nothing else to add other than our district's commitment to vocational schools and Essex County Vocational School is something that has been ongoing effort and supported and much needed. But again, I just wanted a clarification because it said other topics versus new business. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Manny.
So I think we have to be careful not to prescribe a solution. As far as reopening an alternative school, we need, I think, to remind administration that, you know, they need to tell the board what they need to serve our children. And that's just my point, is that all, you know, the alternative school might work for some kids, but we need to know what administration is going to support. The prior alternative school was, you know, the last numbers we saw, it was significantly skewed of our uh, students of color, and I don't know if separating them out, you know, was necessarily the best solution. But you know, I would like to have a broader discussion about how we meet the needs of our children versus prescribing a particular solution.
Thank you for that, Board Member Manny. So the other thing here, I think we did talk about the reports on, I guess, attendance, and that's something that, you know, I think as when we hire the new director of security, is something we can discuss in terms of, you know, what the roles and responsibilities will be and how to action that out for the board. The other thing here is, this is probably a transition to the next thing, is that, you know, for you, Dr. Taylor, I was just going to ask you about, you know, what is your thoughts on, you know, development of the action plans? I know we have to sort of finalize the goal, but I don't know how much of that can be done in tandem with you and your team. So if you could, whatever you're going to say, and then add on to that.
Sure. I just wanted to remind the board that in this past budget, you expanded the pilot for the Cougar Cares program. That methodology, right, where we were targeting students who had past difficulty, and we were assigning them to classes that were smaller with more intensive support at the high school. That approach happens all over the country. It's kind of a school within a school model without kids being separated from their home school, which is what I think one of our board members was mentioning, kind of the stigmatized feeling that some kids may get. I've also seen separate brick and mortar alternative schools and in other places that had good outcomes, right? The kids who were being removed from the pressure to be somebody who they didn't want to be anymore, right? And having a fresh therapeutic start. I will say that I just want to remind everyone of that, and the statement around the graduation rates going down. I just want to caution those who may be watching, right, that we have not reported out on our graduation rates. We haven't received them from the state, and just wanted to make sure that I mentioned that. So for the action plans, that's from my past experience and not my experience here. What would normally happen is after the goals are voted upon by the board officially, we would come back and the team would work together to develop action plans. We would then share the action plans within the committee structure for feedback. Understanding that the action plans are organic, right? Even after we've presented them, as we're moving forward, we're going to discover new steps that we're going to add in to those action plans. And as I give the board goal updates, whether it's mid-year or quarterly or triannual type of approach, I would also update the public and the board on the updated action plans. So highlighting things that were added, right, and steps that were added that were not anticipated before the actual uh, the actual plans move forward.
Great, thank you. So just in terms of where we go from here, right? We had a lot of discussion on a lot of themes in different committees and different areas that the board thinks is important for the district in terms of driving, work for this year. So I think for us as the board, our next steps are just, continue discussions within our committees on what we heard tonight and, refine some of these themes. We heard some areas of prioritization, based on conversation that happened. So, trying to, basically arrive at our September committee meetings, in terms of the work, we get from you and the SLT on things, for us to have the discussion with and have like drafts, right, of potential goals that could be, refined during committee that can then be collated and shared with the entire board in advance of our September 20th our general body meeting, where we can vote on them then, so they can then be basically at that point you can start or you and your team can start the action planning process. So that's what I see. I don't know. I left this blank because I'm gonna fill it in with what you think is next from your side. Obviously I don't want to speak for you and the SLT, but what do you envision next, Dr. Taylor, in terms of the goal setting process?
So I think that the board also has more space, right? To kind of determine, do we need a goal from every committee? Or maybe do we know that some of the discussions are more administrative and kind of updates and reports, and maybe one topic area can have more than one goal? And that's kind of an open discussion that I will leave for the board. But there could be two CNI goals and one policy and one with, of course, construction that is such an overarching lift right now. So for our next steps, for the board to give us what you deem as a draft for the different district goals, and we could review those and give feedback, or the SLT and I could work on developing drafts of goals based on this presentation and push them back to the committees for feedback. We're open to either or. My only trepidation is, we're opening schools. And so we're really focused in on opening schools, and we have lots of work still pushing forward to that
Yeah,
end.
so I'd rather us do that because, as you said, you're opening schools. Us as parents, those of us who are parents of district, are getting ready to send them. So we appreciate that. So we will work on. We will, I guess, sort of do the refining on our side and send them your way. I just didn't know if there was anything SLT could do just based on some of the themes they had to start preparing. But as you said, if the focus is on September 9th, which we all understand, so we appreciate that. Any before we close out this and then go into, I guess it's the second public speaks and new business, any other board member comments on the themes and that we heard this evening? All right, thank you. I'm going to stop sharing. Here's the button. Okay, and then I believe we're now at the time for, if I can pull up the agenda quickly, I believe we're now at second public speaks. So I guess I'll read it again. Let me just make sure we have any before I read the. Okay, I don't see anything here in the audio comments. And Mr. Bonds, I do see. Okay, I do have a written one, so bear with me 1 second while I pull this up. Okay. All right, so our first written public speaks during the second public speak session is from Tyrone Jean of South Orange. I'm highly concerned that all children are being forced to wear face coverings for the entire school day. What is the psychological damage of teaching children to fear one another and to prohibit them from seeing facial expressions? What effects does masking wearing for long periods of time have on immune systems for young children and forcing them to breathe through sweat, spit, dirt, and bacteria rags all day? 480 kids died from the flu in the 2018-2019 season. That is more deaths than COVID-19 had in the past year and a half in kids 0 through 18. Why haven't we forced masks on children in previous flu seasons? The death rate of COVID-19 for children is nearly 0%, 0.008% to be exact. With the vaccine ready and available for adults and older children, we should give parents the choice to send their children to school with a mask or not. There will be many children who feel uncomfortable with mask wearing all day. It is cruel and unnecessary to force all children to wear masks for the entire day. This is not for protection. This is child abuse. Please provide students and parents with the choice to do what is best for their child. Again, that was from Tyrone Jean, I believe it's Jean, from South Orange. And that concludes our second public speaks. All right, we're now at the time for new business. Does anyone have any new business this evening? Seeing none, I'll close new business, and I'd like to make a motion for the following. The Board of Education's Curriculum and Instruction Committee, which is a committee of the whole, will meet in public on Tuesday, September 14th at 5:30 p.m. using the online video conference platform. The Board of Education will meet in closed session on Monday, September 20th, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. in the superintendent's office at 525 Academy Street in Maplewood, New Jersey, as well as using the online video conference platform to discuss personal and legal issues, negotiations, and other matters to be announced at a later date. Immediately following closed session, the Board of Education will meet in public session in the district meeting room at 525 Academy Street in Maplewood, as well as using the online video conference platform, which will include hearings of individuals and delegates. Community can view the meeting by following steps which will be listed on the agenda. If there are members of the committee who would like to attend the meeting in person, please note that masks and social distancing are required. Action will be taken. May I have a second? Thank you, Board Member Saban. All in favor? All right, that is unanimous, Mr. Burnside. All right, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn this evening's retreat at 8:05 p.m. on Thursday, August 26th. Thank you, Board Member Cottle, for the second. All in favor? Thank you all and have a wonderful evening. Good night. Stay safe.
Good night, everyone. Stay safe.
Good night.